Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast, and including our Facebook Live that we have now as a post-game show it's our instant reaction from Ohio State's 51-10 win over Indiana. A very impressive performance by the Ohio State offense, the Ohio State defense, the trenches all around. It was a game where, as you like to say, if Ohio State was a really, really good team, this is what this game would look like. This is the kind of game that should come from a stellar team beating a average to, I can't say decent, but not terrible, not bad. Like putting they didn't belong on the same field type of stuff against a team that might beat some decent teams this year, but Indiana had nothing for Ohio State, and Ohio State did everything they wanted. And that was an impressive performance.
Well, this is 2 weeks in a row where Ohio State's playing a team that it should beat.
Yep.
They should have beaten Cincinnati. They should have beaten Indiana. But both weeks we came in kind of thinking, there's a way they can kind of screw around and keep this a game longer than it should be. And if you you screw around and keep them in the game, and you have one or two real disastrous plays, you throw a pick six, you have a fumble return for a touchdown, you snap the ball over the punter's head, whatever. You could screw around long enough to lose this game. It's possible. And Ohio State has come out the last 2 weeks and just ground people into dust on both sides of the ball. And this has not been like Alabama and Clemson back-to-back weeks or anything like that. But that to do this to teams that are potentially, Cincinnati's probably an 8-win team. This Indiana team is probably a 5-win team. These are both bowl-ish teams. So to come out the last 2 weeks and be 93-10 against them, that's that one touchdown you gave up was on a trick play. Those are some statement wins.
Yeah, and it's impressive to watch them on both sides of the ball right now doing whatever they want. And I tend to think maybe that second half of the Florida Atlantic game is the best thing that's happened to them this year because it kind of slapped them, woke them up, and they're using that to motivate themselves or just to remind themselves there's no reason to let down. We've got enough talent to just continue. We've got the right attitude. We've got the right coaches, the right schemes. Why let up? Why not just keep going? And as much as Ryan Day preaches aggressiveness, and they're doing that, and it's a fun team to watch because they're doing it in all manners of ways. Defense, special teams. We saw that today with the block punt, passing game. When the under center stuff with the play action, the bootlegs, their receivers so wide open on those. I'm not even talking about the deep stuff. I'm just the comeback stuff, the 14-yard hooks, and there's just a lot going on with this offense, and it's doing this while Justin Fields had 199 yards passing, nothing special. His worst game is a Buckeye.
Yeah,
and I think you'll take it because when they're running the ball that well, but could they have? What would this game have looked like last year if Dwayne Haskins is only throwing for 199 yards? Because they're not going to run it like this,
right?
And that's not something that last year they could really thrive on. And this, 51 points, of course, 44 of those are the offense. Defense had, actually 42, I guess, for the offense. And the defense is scoring, and you're not needing this outstanding passing game, but it's still pretty good. But the real story is just the way you said it. They're just grinding people into dust. The offensive line, J.K. Dobbins is getting 8-9 yards and at will whenever he wants, left side, right side, up the middle. It's not just one side. We're always going to go to the left because that's where Orlando Pace is. These guys, there are 5 Orlando Paces out there.
That might be a little aggressive, but they are. You talk about what would it have looked like if Dwayne Haskins had 194 yards passing last year? Well, first of all, they wouldn't have been able to run the ball because J.K. Dobbins was running the ball for 4 yards and change. Today, J.K. Dobbins 8.8 yards per carry. That's roughly twice as good. So that's pretty impressive. And then Master Teague to come in and 10.6 yards per carry. Teague and Dobbins together, 32 carries for 300 yards exactly. No, I'm sorry, 299 yards exactly, because Dobbins lost 1 yard. So I hope he thinks about that he cost himself and Teague a 300-yard rushing game. For shame. To have this running game now, it looks like an Ohio State offense.
Yeah.
To have the defense just dominating the line of scrimmage, absolutely dominating the line of scrimmage, and flying around. And I mean, these are all these just vacuous football cliches. They're flying around, they're making plays, but they are literally, that's what they're doing. They are flying to the ball. You see just gang tackling, guys swarming to the ball, very aggressive. I mean, this looks like an Ohio State football team. Last year's team was a very good team, but it didn't look like an Ohio State football team because they couldn't run the ball and they played atrocious defense.
Yeah.
This year, this looks like, when you in your head think great Ohio State football teams, this is what it looks like. And even then, this stands out in a way from, I can't remember the last time an Ohio State team looked this good. An Ohio State team looking this good early in the year, maybe like 2002 when they just stomped Washington State and Texas Tech real early in the year. But, I mean, to do it, this isn't like, okay, they're just drubbing a bunch of crappy MAC teams all in a row or beating Youngstown State. These are pretty competent opponents. And I can't remember the last time Ohio State did this to teams this early in the year.
And it really makes you wonder how far they'll drop in the next poll, based on, because I mean, this is a good-looking team, and you just wonder like how detrimental that is. Master Teague, J.K. Dobbins. We shouldn't just skip over J.K. Dobbins, because he was what his career high was 203 yards last year against Maryland. He finished 10 yards shy of that. They wanted him running tougher. He is running so hard now. I mean, he's not the biggest guy, but he is running over people. He's throwing them down. Ryan Day said after the game that he knows there's going to be some plays they're going to watch on film in front of the team and just showcase J.K. Dobbins and how hard he ran, because there's plenty to like with what he did. And then he had two big home runs today. I hope people don't give him too much grief for not scoring on the 56-yard run, because there was traffic around him. There were some angles. He cut back in. Maybe just go straight. Maybe just keep going straight, and we'll see.
He didn't get caught from behind. There was a guy who was in front of him that he was trying to make miss.
Right.
So,
but it's good to see him getting back to the form that he wanted as a true freshman back. But he didn't run this hard. He was just elusive, I think, back then, and there were big holes for him back then.
Yeah.
Now he is running on contact, and even when he does get hit early, he's still getting a couple yards like they want him to. Used him in the passing game. He had the bad drop, which he, Justin Fields told him, "Don't worry about it. In the end zone, we'll get back to it later." When he did finally throw it to him, I think he threw it so hard at him that he had no choice but to catch it.
Self-defense.
Exactly,
yeah.
And so that's how he knew that would stick in there. But just a really good game for J.K. Dobbins. It's Lydell Ross loved playing against the Indiana Hoosiers, Antonio Pittman, but I would put J.K. I don't know if we want to put him above Antonio Pittman. We could definitely put him again above Lydell Ross, but another really good performance 2 weeks in a row from J.K. And you remember when Eddie George, his Heisman season, didn't get that 100 yards in the season opener
against Boston College.
Boston College, and maybe we'll have something like that where Dobbins is just churning out yardage, and then you look back on that season opener like, Urgh.
Yeah, this was. I had someone ask me after the game, so is this J.K. Dobbins joining the Heisman race? And it's like, you're only going to have one Heisman contender on a team, so odds are it's probably Fields, just because he's going to have the fancy touchdowns accounted for numbers and all of that. But I mean, having two people who are at least in that conversation is probably a good sign, because they had one last year and there was no one else who was even like part of the conversation.
I wonder if J.K. would struggle with that notion, or not that he would struggle with it, but his odds. If you aren't necessarily the best running back in the conference, in your conference, with Jonathan Taylor here in the Big Ten, even if J.K. were to outrush him, I don't know if that's possible. But that's I think it's easier to be the best quarterback in the Big Ten as long as Jonathan Taylor is not playing quarterback.
Yeah, which
He's
so
not.
far, so good.
And the way Jack Cohn is playing, you don't need Jonathan Taylor back at quarterback. But I can't really speak enough about the offensive line. They're protecting Justin Fields. They're moving people. And this is kind of what we thought we would see, or what we talked about would be possible with this offensive line in the offseason, with the potential that they had to put out there.
Well, we had talked about the fact that we thought this would be a better offensive line than it had been in previous years. So from that respect, it's not really surprising me. And Blaze in the comments says the offensive line hasn't been tested by a good defensive line. He'll reserve judgment until he sees that, but darn good so far. I don't know what else they could have done at this point to prove that they are what we thought they were, or perhaps better than that. You get to play the teams that are in front of you. And this is not a bunch of FCS teams. This is not, UTEP and UConn. I mean, they're decent teams. They have not played Clemson yet, but if they're going to at least, and if they do play Clemson, they're not going to do that against Clemson. They're not going to rush for...
I doubt they do this against Michigan State.
Right, yeah. No, they're not going to rush for 9.5 yards against Michigan State, or probably Michigan, or Wisconsin, or Penn State, or someone you'd face in the playoff, probably. But this is what it looks like if you can then rush for 5 yards against those teams. 4.5, 5 yards a carry. That's all you have to do. You don't have to rush for 9 yards a carry to beat Clemson. But if you can rush for 5 yards a carry, then you can stay balanced, and then you can...
And if you can churn out 200 yards, that's usually a good winning number, because you have been able to control it, and you have been able to move the ball and move the chains. And usually if you're running for 200 yards, you're around that 4 or 5 yard per carry average if you're controlling the ball. And I think, I want to see what they do, obviously, against a better defensive line. But it's been impressive, and it's what they needed to see. And it's given Justin Fields time to look downfield and find Chris Olave and Ben Victor and Austin Mack. And I still think there's more of that to come, because the stuff is available, or will continue to be available as we see more teams try to, I guess, be more aggressive. Tom, were they able to take advantage of Justin Fields today? Was Indiana as they said they would? I mean, it was his worst game as a Buckeye.
It was. He completed just shy of 40% of his passes. So, I mean, in that way,
60,
sure.
Right?
Just shy of 60%. Sorry, yeah. It's just shy of 60% of his passes. So, I mean, sure.
How many touchdowns? 3? That's okay though, right?
Yeah, I mean,
no interceptions.
If you're the quarterback of a team that puts up 52 points, you're probably pretty happy with your performance overall. And they couldn't get Ohio State off the field. That was the thing. The first 9 drives of the game, 26 yards, 68 yards, 31 yards, 63 yards, 75 yards, 58 yards, 26 yards, 75 yards, 97 yards. Yeah. And then after the pick 6 by Damon Arnett, then the fourth quarter, 5 plays, 18 yards, 3 plays, 2 yards, 4 plays, no yards. But that's Chris Chuganoff, that's Gunnar Hoke at that point. They didn't get... I mean, here is the ends of the drives when Justin Fields was in the game. Missed field goal, touchdown, punt. They had 1 punt in the first quarter. Touchdown, 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 end of half, and that's a conversation we should probably have, the end of half management. Touchdown, touchdown, and then the pick 6. I mean, that as a quarterback in a conference game on the road, that's pretty impressive.
Did that punt, was that preceded by a penalty where they...
I think that might have been...
They moved it from 4th and 1 to 4th and 6 or something, or 4th and 4?
Yes, I think that was one where they had like a false start or something, and it was, it went from 4th and 1 to 4th and 6.
But let's talk about that end of half stuff, because we were kind of super angry last week when they didn't go for a score down. They had over a minute with the ball, and not too far to go. I mean, 70, 80 yards, I don't know. But a similar situation today, although they were backed up a little ways in this one. But there was time, and they got some... The first carry by J.K. was 12, 13 yards, exactly what you want if you're running the ball in that first carry to see what you can get. But then there's no urgency. And I know you got the ball back in the second half of this one. But it would have been, and it's greedy, but you just gave up a touchdown. In order to shut down any momentum Why not see what you can do? But just like last week, they were up. Cincinnati hadn't scored, so why bother trying to give them something? So, while Ryan Day says he wants to be aggressive, and he will be aggressive, I understand why he hasn't been these last two games, but I would still like to see him fulfill on his, promise to America.
Yeah, they got the ball back with 1:07 left in the first half. And they had at least 2, maybe all 3 timeouts left.
2, I think, yeah.
And they had it at their own 16. So, okay, that's not great field position. But as soon as J.K. Dobbins gets that first rush for 15 yards to the 31-yard line, okay, now there's a minute left, and you've got the ball in your own 31 with 2 timeouts left. Now go. Like, at that point, go. Like, if you're backed up inside your own 20, like, okay, I get it. But once you're out there, okay, now go. Because there's no sense in wasting a possession, which is what they did there. And they've done that all 3 weeks, which, maybe that's something that they're not going to do if it's a closer game. Maybe that's something that you're, when you're playing at Northwestern in a couple weeks, or if it's, 17-10 at Nebraska.
A good topic to ask Ryan Day about. Where is the threshold? Minute 30?
Right.
Where is the yardage threshold? Where is the time threshold? Where do they meet?
And it seems like something you would want to let your players do at some point. And
because you need that.
You don't have to break out all of your wonderful 2-minute drill best plays. Like, just run something. Run some 2-minute drill. See how Justin Fields does. Just run your regular offense faster. You don't need to bust out the stuff you're saving for a big spot when you really need to make that drive. But I don't know why they've sat on it 3 weeks in a row. The first week it was like, okay, they were kind of backed up. Last week there was really no reason. This week, once they got to the 31, there was really no reason. But when you're up that much, I think you get to okay, just don't screw things up and get into the locker room with a 3-touchdown lead, and it's
because you probably go through the whole thing like, would I take 30-10 at the half? Yes. So why not take it?
Yeah. Thomas Rossetti says the coaching staff seems better coordinated, communication much better than with Urban. Pace is far more consistent, less hurry up and wait. They did have some delay of games that were.
One was after the free kick.
Like I don't know why. I mean, okay, it was after a safety, so okay, it's kind of a sudden change situation. But
there was no TV timeout. I think Ryan Day was expecting a TV timeout, and that's maybe why things
which with the frequency that TV timeouts were coming today makes sense.
Right,
but. Yeah, that was.
But I agree with the communication with the staff, especially in the secondary, the defensive staff. And this is being year 3 for Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson. Yeah. They know how to handle this and how to make all the calls. And just Kevin Wilson knows when to chime in, and he knows what Ryan wants, and they speak the same language now over the headsets. And Mike Yursich is able to chime in with stuff as well. But it's becoming a well-oiled machine between those guys.
Yeah. Blaze in the comments says best in history, and the question is best what in history, and the answer to pretty much all of them is too soon to tell. Yeah. I mean, this is. I think I have a pretty well established history as the pessimist or doubter or whatever you want to call it on staff. Oh yeah, hater for sure. But the one who is least likely to say, wow, this is it, this is incredible. Just like you've seen it enough like in the past that, okay, they'll look like this sometimes and then they'll fall down the elevator shaft at some point. And you're kind of waiting for that to happen because, again, these are not amazing teams that they're doing this against. They're good, they're fine teams. And they've been very impressive. But even I, at this point, am looking at this and going, this team's pretty good. Yeah. Like, this team it's not just flashy. And there are things that you would like to have a real speed burner wide receiver on this team, and I don't think they have that. And, there are a couple other things you would probably like to have on this team that they don't. But to do what they've done in the trenches on both sides of the ball, and for Chase Young to look like Chase Young has looked, and for the defense on the whole, I mean, just so fundamentally sound after last year, it is this is like 95th percentile for what this team could look like at this point of the year. Like, I mean, Justin Fields is not going to look like end of last year Trevor Lawrence yet. Just doesn't have the reps yet.
Right.
He could end up there. If he was going to end up there, this is kind of like what those first 3 weeks would look like. I mean, Trevor Lawrence wasn't starting this time last year. So, this is a long way to December, a long way to January, but they're off to a real good start.
I think it comes down to, it's not this is what they look like, it's this is what they are. Mm-hmm. That's where you start to think maybe this isn't just what they look like when things are going well. Maybe this is what they are, and they're the cause of all of the things going well, and it doesn't necessarily matter who the opponent is because they can do that to most teams.
Yeah, and I would still like to see. I mean, at some point,
I'm sold. I don't care.
Yeah,
I'm all in.
Yeah, you're pushing your chips to the center of the table. You're grabbing chips from other people and pushing them into the center of the table.
Come on, guys, all in.
I would like to see this team in the Penn State situation last year, down a couple scores, fourth quarter on the road. Okay, now let's see what you can do. It's going to happen at some point. This is not going to be the team that goes wire to wire and never trails all season. And because like the 1998 team, they just absolutely stomped people into the ground all year. But as soon as they got down once, when one bad thing happened, and then they fell down, and then you look at the game management after that, and it was like the coaches panicked, the players panicked. No one knew what to do. Everyone was just, it was like a fire drill, and then they lost to a team they had no business losing to. So
it's such a depressing topic.
I mean, but you've seen this.
Yeah.
If you've watched Ohio State football, you have seen teams that look like this blow it later. You have seen Iowa 2 years ago. You've seen Purdue last year. It can happen. They are at some point going to be challenged this year. I'm very interested to see how they respond to that challenge. But so far, I mean, this is as so far so good as so far so good gets at this point of the season.
You mentioned back then the Rose Bowl when Jake Plummer scores to take the lead. It's like, yes, this is what happens to Ohio State. This is what happens to us. This now we will not be able to go and make this comeback because we never do that. That was how I felt way back then. It's like, point me to an example of this going well. And there weren't many or any. But right now things are pointing in a, I don't want to say northerly direction because things aren't all that great up north.
Yeah.
So in a positive direction, if you will. Let's talk about this defense. You mentioned Chase Young, another 2 sacks today. The dude... and I think I said on this show or somewhere, like, comparing him to a Bosa, it's like, don't do that. I said that before the season.
Yeah.
Don't do that. That's not fair to him. And not that it's not fair to him. It's just like he's not a Bosa.
Yeah.
But you might want to check that birth certificate.
Yeah. Well, he is what he had 3 sacks coming in.
Yep.
He had 2 more today, so he's got 5 sacks through 3 games.
That's good math.
That's. 5 sacks through 3 games. The school record is 14. Nick
Bosa had 4 through 2.5 before he got hurt last year.
Yeah, something like that. He is right on that Nick Bosa pace. So, assuming he stays healthy, assuming they keeps playing the whole year. And he had sacks last year playing on 2 bum ankles.
Yep.
And
he's not even playing an entire game yet.
No.
So.
And it's not just like. Those are the times he's getting the quarterback. Like every game, there's been he had 2 sacks, and he could have had another one or another 1.5.
And he had a tackle on a wide receiver, on a screen. In this game, he's just
2.5 tackles for loss.
Good.
2.5 tackles for loss. Ohio State had 12 tackles for loss. 12 tackles.
Those first couple of series, Indiana had -4 yards and then -3 yards, and that tackling out wide on those quick screens. That was outstanding. When you think of last year, there would have been some big gainers on some of that stuff last year, and this year, they tried. Indiana tried going back to that and there was just nothing there. And then they were like, "Screw it, we better start just throwing deep and throwing downfield and seeing if we can get something." Because those first couple of series were negative yards, and then throw it deep on third down and hope for a pass interference. Later on, they were getting some yards by going over the middle. Everybody that Ohio State has played this year has a pretty good tight end.
Yeah.
And they're getting some yards there. But if your tight end is your best player and you only have one, I'm not talking about Iowa because they had two.
Yeah.
If you only have one, it's going to be tough to beat the Buckeyes. Miami Hurricanes saw that in 2002. Mm-hmm. Kellen Winslow was their only good player. And he couldn't do it all on his own.
Citation needed.
But Damon Arnett with a 96-yarder. He watched that throw the entire way and jumped up in front and caught it and had some nice blocking, and it was a nice return. And there was no way to see a replay in this place because the TVs are not well positioned for us.
Yes.
I'm assuming it was fun to watch. I'm assuming it was impressive the second time around. Josh Proctor, though, Tom. Mm-hmm. Dropped interceptions.
Josh Proctor, once again, I was down on the field, and I saw, here he comes. He's going to do it. I was watching him the whole way, and nope.
He had one thrown right to between the 4 and the 1.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Do you cut him?
Someone asked Chase Young if he was going to make Josh Proctor go hit the jugs machine with him this week. Maybe. Might need to. But here's the thing on those young defensive players. Like we talked about Chase Young, he's kind of the party piece here. Tyler Friday had a sack. Javonte Jean-Baptiste had a sack. Zach Harrison had a sack. Pete Werner, every Ohio State fan's favorite Buckeye. Pete Werner, 5 tackles today, 2 tackles for loss. I mean,
all solo tackles.
All solo tackles. I mean, he and that was good, solid, technical, like well done, good technique, like. I know that everyone has a real issue with admitting that maybe they were wrong or that what they thought before may no longer be the case. Like that is the most 2019 thing. Boy, speaking of the most 2019 thing, loud noises outside our podcast. How about that? How's that for excitement?
We're in the press box. We got a window open.
Yeah.
But
and there's apparently a fire truck hovering in the air right outside the window. So that's exciting.
Tom, put out your cigar.
So Pete Werner, 2 tackles for loss. Malik Harrison, tackle and a half for loss. Shaun Wade, tackle for loss. Tyler Friday, 2 tackles for loss. Devon Hamilton, tackle for loss. I mean, it's just on and on and on. And it's not just that a couple guys are making good plays. Everyone's making plays. The whole defense is making plays. The whole defense is bought into this system. And again, after the game today, I think it was Chase Young was saying... someone asked him, like, what's the difference this year? He's like, well, it's a new scheme. It's a new system. It's like, well, yeah. So, I mean, again, I'm
going to start asking defense players, is it because you're not having to think as much this year?
Yeah.
Just, like I said, we just continue to bang that horse, to beat that dead horse.
I mean, it's just...
And write that same piece every week if we can.
But, I mean, the story continues to be, how could they possibly be this good after being so bad last year? And it's like, I mean... That's the answer. That continues to be the answer. That has always been the answer. We were telling you that was the answer last year.
Yes.
We have been telling you that was the answer this spring and this summer, and now this fall, now that it's changed. Everyone's going, hey, that's still the answer. So, I mean, it's a topic, and every time it's a topic, we can give you a different answer, but that's the actual answer.
You know who else is playing really, really well, all Big Ten level right now, is Devon Hamilton. Mm-hmm. He's splitting carries, but he's in the backfield. Mm-hmm. He's as a nose tackle. You're not necessarily expecting him to show up in the box score, but he flashes and he plays really well. He's strong. He played some 3-tech in the first game and is a versatile guy as well. And that whole defensive line. And they're still missing Jonathan Cooper.
Yeah.
Maybe in a couple weeks he'll be back. Tyreek Smith had a sack last week. It's a good group, and they're leading the way for that defense. They're setting the tone, and then you've got the linebackers who are feeding off of it, staying clean, able to get those solo tackles, and then the secondary, which is just operating. And it was good to see them. They got tested. They gave up some yards today, but they never looked out of sorts. They weren't pointing fingers, and they weren't. And I'm not saying like an accusatory tone, but like in a confused tone, like you were supposed to be over here. I was over here. That doesn't happen with these guys. And Jeff Okudah, Shaun Wade, all of these guys. It's fun to watch defense play like this, and it shouldn't be. As I say with offense and coaches, like if you have a bad offense, that's by choice. Like if you choose not to have an offense that puts stress on a defense, you are choosing to do that. And similarly, if you have good players and a bad defense, that is also by choice, and you're not putting them in the right positions to succeed. And right now, it's like a master class of Hafley and Madison and Larry Johnson getting the best out of their players and putting them in those, first chair, third chair, whatever. I'm not a big music maker person, but they're all sitting in the proper seats.
Well, and Indiana had just in throwing the ball today, averaged 6 yards per attempt, which is not a lot.
Yeah.
And that includes 49 yards on a trick play. So Peyton Ramsey, the starting quarterback, 33 attempts, 162 yards. That's basically right on 5 yards per attempt. So 5 yards per attempt for a guy, Peyton Ramsey cut them apart last year. Had 3 touchdowns and like 300 yards passing. 5 yards per attempt. If you give up 5 yards per attempt, unless you're doing that to like a triple option service academy team that has to make its hay on the ground, it's almost impossible to lose a game giving up 5 yards per attempt, just because you're not going to complete that many passes,
right.
And you have to complete 2 passes to get a first down every single time, and
there's not enough return.
There's not, and they were 19 of 33, so that was barely 50% of their passes they completed.
And that run defense again is outstanding. There is no running room.
Right.
I don't know why you keep trying to run up the middle, but then if you try to run wide, Chase Young is out there, Pete Warner is out there, Jordan Fuller, Sean Wade. I mean, they pursue so well, and they've played some good running backs, and they are shutting those guys down. I wonder if maybe the quicker guys will give them some trouble. I don't know. I guess we'll see the quicker, more agile guys that they don't run, just pound them up the middle.
Right.
And maybe there'll be some things there.
But I
might have to scheme them up. I don't know.
Yeah, and there's a lot of teams in the Big Ten that are not running the ball well. I mean, Wisconsin's going to be a challenge. But you would look at like Penn State as one of the real stiff challenges this year. Penn State hasn't been able to run the ball at all.
Sean Clifford, I think, is their leading rusher. He was coming into this game.
And the rushers for Indiana today: Samson James, 4 carries, 14 yards. Peyton Ramsey, 14 carries, 14 yards. Stevie Scott, 6 carries, 9 yards. Cole Guest, 2 carries, 6 yards. Yeah. I mean, and Samson James, normally you look at Indiana and go, okay, well, there's a bunch of guys Ohio State didn't want. Samson James was an Ohio State commit and then decommitted and flipped to Indiana because he wanted to be, a chance to play early and kind of be an impact player on the program.
The long rush was Peyton Ramsey, 20 yards on a blitz from Malik Harrison, I think.
Yeah,
he missed him and then got free.
The linebacker came up the middle and he was able to duck out.
That's some fake stats right there.
It's basically. The long run was on basically a busted play.
So you're talking 30 carries for 22 yards without that scramble.
You had the long run was on a busted play, and the long pass was on a trick play.
Yeah. So
and that's 69 of their 69 of their 257 yards. So the other 65 plays went for 188 yards. It's just that's insane against a team that is. Indiana is not great, but Indiana is an offense that can move the ball, and they did nothing today.
And this isn't your typical backup quarterback. Yeah, Michael Penix was out, but Peyton Ramsey is not your typical guy who doesn't see the field. He was the starter all last year. He's done this before. Yeah. And when you hold any offense under 300 yards, those are winning numbers. And just an overmatched opponent that we came in. I think we all picked them to win by 3 or 4 touchdowns. It wasn't like we were looking for a close game. But as you're watching the game and it's 30-10, and you're just like, they might be like really, really good, and being in the Big Ten, you win the Big Ten, and you are a playoff contender, but there's a level above that, and they might. Right now, they're looking like that's a real possibility.
Well, this game completely swung, and early in the second quarter, you had the 37-yard pass to Chris Olave that moved it from 7-3 to 14-3. Next possession. Like a minute and 11 seconds later, Olave blocks the punt for a safety. They get the ball immediately. 5 plays, 75 yards, a minute 45, field to KJ Hill. All of a sudden, in the span of 2 minutes and 56 seconds, it went from 7-3 to 23-3. And that was it. And it was like, okay, and now the game's over. And then Indiana gets the ball, gets stopped. Ohio State gets the ball right back, 5 plays, 58 yards, J.K. Dobbins, 26-yard run, and now it's 30-3. And it's like, okay.
Yeah. Good night.
Good night. That's it. And, Indiana had that trick play right before half to kind of make it a little interesting, make it 30-10. But then right after the half, boom, Ohio State gets the ball right down the field, 7 plays, 75 yards, 2 minutes, 45 seconds. And that's it. And it's 37-10. And then, Teague had that incredible 40-yard run. Damon Arnett. Speaking of people who Ohio State fans are not huge fans of, Damon Arnett, you got maybe time to write Damon Arnett an apology.
Playing like a first rounder right now and has done nothing this season to upset people, and yet I still see people get mad at him for reacting to a play or celebrating or flexing or dancing. Yeah. He's a quarterback, you know. Leave last year and last year. Yeah. Judge his dance moves on this year.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and if they're doing, I saw an Indiana cornerback get up and do like a big incomplete celebration at one point. It was like, but you're down 40 points.
Right. It's still incomplete, Tom.
It was incomplete.
Just helping the ref.
Facts only. This is we go back and listen to probably any podcast from January, maybe even back like last October or so through, the present, and you will probably hear us say, this is probably not on the players. This might be a schematic thing, and you're going to have to give the players a clean slate because now there's a different scheme, and everyone has sort of identified that maybe there were some changes that need to be made, and maybe some people are coaching in the NFL now, and or spending spending time with their families or whatever. And hey, all the same players are good now. And I'm just a caveman. Your college football defense frightens and confuses me. But even I think, hey, maybe it wasn't just the players.
Could be.
Maybe.
That's your opinion.
In my simple opinion.
Right. Any questions do we have?
Thomas just said, big thing, moving Fields under center when the need arises. That
play action off that is what they wanted, and it's been effective.
That's been good. The mix of that and a little bit of pistol and a little bit of kind of the more traditional shotgun just gives you a couple different looks, and you can essentially run the same basic plays out of those 3 different things and get 3 kind of different looks. That's something that a lot of offenses will do is they'll have a relatively small number of plays and just show them out of a ton of different formations, and you can get all sorts of different matchups just by showing something else. And you show one thing and that makes the defense react a certain way, and that can set up a certain element or a certain receiver on that play, whatever, to do something big.
Yep. And as we've seen, they didn't even have to do much of the read option. They did it at least once. That was very effective with Justin Fields walking into the end zone. But he said after the game, or Ryan Day said, that it wasn't really needed today because they're running the ball just fine straight ahead, which is also a positive sign based on what we saw last year. So, anything else today, Tom, that you wanted to touch on?
Well, Justin Fields, 4 rushes. We talked before the game, like you would probably have games where you just didn't see a lot of Justin Fields. You didn't see it, you weren't going to see a 30-carry game out of J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins had 22 carries today. Justin Fields had 4 carries. One of them he didn't get touched, so he just walked in and a touchdown. One was a sack. 2 other rushes. That was it. 2 other rushes all game. That's big because he didn't get hit. He got sacked that one time. That was it. You really didn't see him get hit a lot in the pocket. You didn't see him take a lot of hits in the run game. Because, if you're looking for somebody to be concerned about, that backup quarterback spot doesn't look like that's real settled right now. And if, Justin Fields gets mono like Sam Darnold did or something, then...
Don't get mono if you're a starting quarterback,
kids. Don't get mono. That's good life advice, even if you're not a starting quarterback, actually. If Fields is healthy, this is a sky's the limit team at this point. If Fields is not available to play for whatever reason, then there's a little bit more of a ceiling on it.
Sky is falling?
Yeah, there's a little bit more of a ceiling on it. And that doesn't change the defensive line. That doesn't change the offensive line. That doesn't change J.K. Dobbins. But it limits you in some other ways that this probably stops being a playoff team at that point if he's out for an extended period of time. But I mean, that's probably true of most. I mean, Clemson probably stops being a college football playoff team if Trevor Lawrence gets hurt. So
you wonder. Just imagine like if Justin Fields did go down for the Michigan game, and then Michigan were to still lose that game to Chris Chugunov or Gunnar Hoke. I'm not. We don't need to talk about it. I'm just saying, just imagine it.
Mm-hmm.
just think about it, and maybe smile and think of us driving back from Indiana, not knowing what kind of traffic or construction we're going to run into, because those aren't happy thoughts.
No.
But overall today, Tom, it's what you wanted to see. If you're talking, we expect this to be a Big Ten championship caliber team. But I haven't seen anything yet, to make me think that they're not headed to Indianapolis. No. And there's still plenty of games to play. But I think I said to you during the game, they could run through the conference like Clemson is going to run through the ACC.
It's possible. I mean, you've got better teams in the Big Ten, but I mean, you look across the Big Ten on Saturday. Maryland looked invincible the first 2 weeks, and then they lose to Temple. Penn State looked incredible the first 2 weeks, and then they almost blew it against Pitt when James Franklin and Pat Narduzzi tried to out-incompetence each other in the closing minutes. And incredible gauge management, really, for both of them. Just, I mean, absolute master strokes. So that's what happens to college teams. Like, you don't get a good consistent performance week to week,
right.
And you can look like absolute world beaters against Idaho, and then you can really hit the gas against Buffalo, but when you're playing a better team, that you start running into issues. Pitt is the functional equivalent of Indiana, probably, or the functional equivalent of Cincinnati. They're fine. They're going to win 5 games this year. They're fine, but they're not Michigan. They're not Wisconsin. They're not. I mean, that's just. And you see what it took for Penn State to win today, and then you look at what happened with Ohio State against a very similar team, and I'm pretty sure Penn State was home and Ohio State was on the road. Everyone wants to go, well, it's just Indiana. Well, when you do that to Indiana on the road, that means something. So,
Now, impressive all around, both sides of the ball and special teams again. It's one of those games where these are the ones where you watch them again, on the DVR on YouTube, because there's some fun stuff to watch. Chris Olave, as always, the punt block. Ryan Day said he's just got a knack for it. We saw that last year. Is he the best punt blocking player that you've ever seen, Tom?
I'm trying to think back to, gunners. Like, I could tell you, the great gunners in Ohio State history. I don't think I remember. I mean, Denzel Ward had the punt block against Penn State a couple of years ago. But
placement kicker, field goal kicker.
Yeah,
blocker.
But I don't remember a punt blocker having multiple punt blocks like that.
You don't really think about it. You think about the guys who run down and tackle,
right?
Like Alonzo Shavers back in the day,
or
Steve
Belisari back in the day,
or the gunners. Yeah. You don't really think of the designated. This guy, watch him. Like, you got DeJuan Jones as a designated field goal kick blocker. You got Chris Olave. There's specialists all over this place.
Well, and Chase Young after the game said that he very nearly blocked a field goal. That field goal in the first half, very nearly got it. He said the official told him it was he missed it by a few inches. So, and he was the one who blocked the field goal a couple weeks ago against Florida Atlantic. That they are making plays on special teams in a way that you don't see. They're making plays on defense in a way that you haven't seen, and they're making plays on offense in a way in the run game that you haven't seen for a few years. All of those together, that's when, if you have all 3 of those phases of the game locked up, and you just don't have a week when you just vapor lock, that's when that's when it becomes a season that people start writing books about.
Yep, and that's why I would say just next week when Ohio State wins 24-10, just think about these last 2 weeks about how good things were, and don't worry too much about Miami of Ohio. They were thinking, Ohio State was thinking ahead to what's coming down the pike, and don't worry. so what if you needed 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns to win next week? It's all right. So, Tom, do you have anything else before we close this up?
I think my final thoughts are, boy, I hope the traffic on Interstate 70 isn't what the Indiana Highway Patrol suggested it might be.
Yeah, but Indiana Highway Patrol.
What do they know about highways in Indiana? Come on.
What do they do? Patrol it? No. Not like the Ohio Highway Patrol.
Exactly.
Anyway, all right, we'll let you guys go. Thank you all for listening. We will talk to you Tuesday after we speak with Ryan Day.